My hands were shaking. The worn-out pages of the leather-bound journal trembled in my grip as I stood there, staring down at the incriminating words that shattered my world. I had come up to the attic looking for old tax records, something mundane, something routine. But what I found was anything but. It started with a name, Jason. The words that followed painted a picture I wasn't ready to see. My wife, Katherine, had been having an affair with our neighbor. I wanted to throw the journal across the room. Scream, break something, anything to release the fury building up inside me. But instead, I kept reading, unable to stop as the details spilled out from her heart onto those pages. Each entry was worse than the last. Descriptions of secret meetings, whispered conversations, stolen touches when I was none the wiser. It was all there, laid out in her neat handwriting like some twisted confession meant for no one's eyes but her own. My chest tightened, bile rising in my throat as I read about her passion. Her desire, the betrayal that had been happening right under my nose. I closed the journal, my fingers digging into the cover as I fought to keep control. This was my chance, my one shot to turn this around and make them pay. I had the proof in my hands, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined the look on Jason's face when I confronted him with the evidence of his filthy secret. I imagined Katherine's panic, the desperation she'd feel when I told her what I planned to do. The power was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. But first, I needed to think. I tossed the journal onto the attic floor, pacing back and forth across the creaking boards. There was no way I could let this slide. Katherine, the woman I had trusted, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had betrayed me. And Jason, that smug bastard living next door, smiling and waving like everything was normal. I clenched my fists. No, they weren't going to get away with this. I would make sure of it. The journal lay on the attic floor, mocking me, as if daring me to confront her right then and there. But I knew better than to rush in blindly. I had the upper hand now, and if I wanted to make them suffer the way I was suffering, I needed to think this through. Confrontation wasn't enough. I wanted something bigger. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done, to know that their actions had consequences. Sitting down on an old, dusty chair, I began to piece together a plan. Katherine didn't know that I had found her journal, and that gave me a crucial advantage. I could pretend that everything was fine, keep playing the role of the clueless husband, and use that time to make sure my revenge would be swift and undeniable. I wouldn't just destroy their little affair, I'd ruin both of their lives. But I couldn't go after Jason just yet. First, I needed to deal with Katherine. She was the one who started this whole thing, the one who let our marriage crumble in secret while I was none the wiser. I would make her pay first. I decided I'd use the journal against her. Confronting her directly wouldn't be enough, I needed leverage. I'd wait until the perfect moment. Maybe when she was getting ready for bed, caught off guard in the mundane rhythm of our everyday life. I'd show her the pages, watch the color drain from her face, and then I'd give her a choice. Either she paid me a hefty sum, or I'd expose her to Jason, her family, and all of our friends. The scandal would crush her. As I mapped it out in my mind, a cold satisfaction started to settle in. I could already picture her panicked expression, her desperate pleading. She wouldn't know what hit her. And as for Jason, he wouldn't get away either. I had something special in mind for him. But first, I had to deal with Katherine. Standing up, I grabbed the journal and headed downstairs. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen. Katherine was probably in the living room, reading or watching one of her shows. The irony of how normal everything seemed wasn't lost on me. I pushed open the door to the living room, and there she was, curled up on the couch, completely unaware that her world was about to fall apart. She glanced up at me and smiled, an innocent, casual smile that made my stomach turn. How could she sit there, acting like everything was fine, when she'd been sneaking around with that scumbag next door? "Hey," she said, her voice soft, as if we were just another married couple having a quiet evening at home. "What's up?" I felt the journal in my hand, heavy with the weight of what it represented. But not yet. I wasn't going to ruin the moment. Not tonight. Tonight, I'd smile back. Play the role. Let her feel safe a little while longer. "Nothing," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about a work project." She nodded, turning her attention back to the TV, and I walked into the kitchen, the cold satisfaction growing inside me. Soon enough, everything would change. But first, I had to wait for the right moment. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A few nights later, as Katherine was getting ready for bed, I knew it was time to set my plan in motion. The house was quiet, just the two of us. The journal was hidden in my nightstand, waiting like a loaded gun. I stood by the bedroom door, watching her. She was brushing her hair in front of the mirror, completely unaware of what was about to happen. The normalcy of the scene made me sick. She had no idea that the life she'd built so carefully, the lies she'd woven, were about to come crashing down around her. And I couldn't wait to see it. I pulled out the journal, the pages rustling as I opened it. "We need to talk." She turned, confused. "About what?" Without saying another word, I tossed the journal onto the bed. Her eyes flickered to it, then back to me, uncertainty creeping into her expression. "What's this?" "You know exactly what it is, Katherine," I said coldly. "I found it. Every word, every disgusting detail about you and Jason." The color drained from her face. She stepped back, staring at the journal as though it might bite her. Her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She was scrambling, trying to make sense of the situation, trying to find a way to explain the inexcusable. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain what? The lies? The sneaking around behind my back with our neighbor? You've been writing it all down like some sort of twisted fantasy. And you think there's an explanation for that?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't about to let her tears soften me. Not after what she had done. This was her punishment, and I was going to see it through. "Please, Larry, I didn't mean for it to happen," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "It was a mistake." Mistake? I cut her off, my anger boiling over. "This wasn't a mistake, Katherine. It wasn't some one-time slip-up. This has been going on for months. You planned this. You hid it, and now you're caught." She collapsed onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Too late for that," I said, my voice cold. "You've already done enough damage. But now it's your turn to feel the consequences." She looked up at me, panic in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" I stood over her, my gaze hard. "You're going to give me what I want, or I'll make sure everyone knows about this. I'll show Jason's wife. I'll tell your family. I'll let all of our friends know what you've done. You'll lose everything. Your reputation, your family, everything." She was shaking, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you want?" "Money," I said flatly. "I want compensation for what you've done to me. You've ruined our marriage, so the least you can do is pay for the damage." $100,000. $100,000? She gasped, her voice barely audible. "That's right," I said, not blinking. "You can figure out how to get it. But if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." Katherine sat there, frozen in shock, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. She knew I wasn't bluffing. I could see it in her eyes. I turned and left the room, leaving her there in her guilt and panic. The first part of my plan was complete, and now, it was only a matter of time before I got what I wanted. But little did I know, this was just the beginning. A few days passed, and the tension in the house was palpable. Katherine barely spoke to me, her eyes red from crying, her steps cautious, as if she were walking on a minefield. But my mind was already moving ahead. The confrontation with her had only been the first step. The next part of my plan involved Jason. I wanted him to feel the weight of this betrayal too. I had been waiting for the right moment to confront him. Every morning I saw him across the street, waving casually like he always did. The bastard. I wondered if he knew I had found out. Or if he still thought I was blissfully ignorant, playing the perfect neighbor. It didn't matter. Today, I'd make sure he knew. I waited until late evening, when Katherine was at her sister's house, working things out, or at least pretending to. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when I grabbed the journal and walked out the door. My heart pounded in my chest, but it wasn't fear. It was a cold, burning anticipation. This was it, the moment I had been planning for. Jason was outside, sitting on his front porch with a beer in hand, his relaxed demeanor infuriating me even more. He noticed me walking toward him, and for a split second, I saw confusion flash across his face. He probably wasn't used to me approaching him without a friendly wave and smile. That suited me just fine. "Hey, Larry," he called out, standing up. "Everything all right?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked straight up to him and tossed the journal onto his porch table. The sound of it hitting the wood was louder than I expected. But it had the effect I wanted. Jason's smile faded as he looked down at the journal, then back at me, his confusion deepening. "What's this?" he asked. Go ahead, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. Open it. He hesitated, his fingers slowly lifting the cover. As he flipped through the pages, his face changed, first confusion, then realization, then the unmistakable expression of panic. He stopped flipping and looked up at me, his eyes wide. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered under his breath. You've been reading this? You're damn right I've been reading it, I snapped. And now you're going to pay for it. Jason shook his head, tossing the journal back onto the table like it disgusted him. Look, Larry, don't even try, I cut him off. I don't want to hear your excuses. I know exactly what's been going on. You and Katherine, you've been sneaking around behind my back for months. He took a step toward me, his hands raised in a defensive gesture. Larry, calm down. This isn't how it looks. Shut up, I shouted. My voice echoed in the quiet street, and for a second, I could feel my anger turning into something raw, something uncontrollable. You think I'm stupid? You think I haven't seen the way you look at her? Read the details she wrote down? You disgust me. Jason's face hardened. He wasn't smiling anymore. The easygoing neighbor routine was gone. He knew there was no talking his way out of this. All right, he said, his voice lower now, more serious. What do you want? I want compensation, I said, stepping closer to him. You're going to pay me for what you've done. I've got everything I need in that journal, and if you don't give me what I'm asking for, I'll make sure your wife, your friends, everyone knows about your little affair with Katherine. Jason's eyes narrowed. He wasn't afraid, at least not like Katherine had been. He studied me, as if sizing me up, weighing his options. Then he smirked. It wasn't the reaction I expected. And it set me on edge. You think you can blackmail me? He asked, his voice almost amused. Is that what this is? I glared at him. I'm not asking twice. Either you pay up, or I'll destroy you. Jason's smirk widened into a grin, and then, to my shock, he started laughing. A cold, condescending laugh that made my blood boil. Oh, Larry, he said, shaking his head. You really don't know what you're getting yourself into, do you? Before I could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. My heart sank as he began swiping through his messages. You see, he continued, you're not the only one who's been paying attention. I've been keeping an eye on you too. My throat tightened. What the hell are you talking about? Jason turned his phone screen toward me, and what I saw nearly knocked the breath out of me. On the screen were messages, my messages, emails I thought were long buried, conversations from years ago when I'd made a few questionable decisions at work. Deals that, if exposed, could ruin me. I know about your little side business, Larry, Jason said, his voice cold and calculating now. I know what you've been hiding. And if you don't back off, I'll make sure you lose everything. So how about we call it even? I stood there, stunned, as the full weight of his words hit me. My plan for revenge had just crumbled in front of me, and now, I was the one being blackmailed. Jason smirked again, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I think it's best for both of us if we just let this go. Don't you? He turned and walked back into his house, leaving me standing there on the porch, paralyzed by the realization that I had just lost control of everything. The following days were a blur of tension and dread. I couldn't stop replaying the confrontation with Jason in my mind, the way he had turned the tables on me with that smug grin. My plan, which had seemed so flawless, was falling apart before my eyes. I was no longer in control, and the realization gnawed at me constantly. At home, things were strained. Katherine knew something was wrong. She sensed the shift, the cold distance between us, but she had no idea just how badly things had unraveled. She tried to approach me, to talk, but every time she did, I found myself retreating further into silence. I was consumed by the fear that Jason would expose my own secrets. The thought of losing my job, my reputation, it was too much to bear. One evening, after Katherine had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The journal lying unopened on the coffee table. The pages seemed to mock me now. They held the evidence of her betrayal, but I had no power to use it without risking my own destruction. My thoughts churned, my anxiety rising as I wondered how to salvage any semblance of control. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart raced as I walked to the door, hoping against hope that it wasn't Jason with more threats or, worse, some new twist in this nightmare. I opened the door to find a man I didn't recognize. He was well dressed, holding a briefcase, and his expression was all business. Mr. Lewis? He asked. I nodded, feeling a pang of unease. I'm Thomas Reed, an attorney. May I come in? I hesitated but then stepped aside to let him in. He took a seat on the couch, setting his briefcase beside him. I sat across from him, trying to mask my anxiety. Mr. Reed, what's this about? I asked, my voice strained. Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. I'm here on behalf of Jason Campbell. He wanted me to deliver a message to you. I tensed. What message? Thomas slid a folder across the table to me. It appears Mr. Campbell has some information he'd like to discuss with you. It involves certain business practices you've engaged in over the years. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The documents were detailed, showing records and communications that could easily unravel my career. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. I see, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And what does Jason want? Thomas looked at me with a practiced neutrality. Mr. Campbell wants to negotiate a settlement. He's willing to overlook the issue in exchange for a financial arrangement. He's asking for a sum to be paid by the end of the month. My mind raced. I was trapped. Jason had leverage over me now, and there was no way to counteract it without risking everything. I was caught in his trap, and my plan for revenge was slipping through my fingers. I tried to maintain a facade of calm as I addressed the lawyer. And if I refuse? Thomas's expression remained impassive. If you refuse, Mr. Campbell will take legal action, and the information will be made public. It could lead to serious consequences for you, professionally and personally. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. I understand. Thomas gathered his documents and stood up. Very well. I'll relay your response to Mr. Campbell. I suggest you make your decision quickly. After he left, I was left alone with my thoughts, the documents still spread out on the coffee table. I had hoped to turn the tables on Jason, but now I was the one being manipulated. The realization that I had lost control was almost too much to bear. Katherine came down the stairs, sensing the shift in the air. Who was that? She asked, her voice tinged with concern. Just an attorney, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Nothing to worry about. She looked at me, her eyes searching for answers. Are you sure you're all right? I forced a smile, though it felt hollow. Yeah, I'm fine. But inside, I was anything but fine. The control I had once thought I wielded was slipping away, and the power I had sought to exact was now wielded against me. My plan was falling apart, and all I could do was brace myself for the fallout. The days dragged on in a haze of worry and desperation. Every morning, I would wake up with a sinking feeling, knowing that Jason had the upper hand. The documents from the lawyer served as a constant reminder of the precarious situation I was in. I had to find a way out, and fast, before Jason's threats turned into reality. Katherine was still oblivious to the full extent of the situation. She continued to act as if everything was normal, though her worry was palpable. She frequently asked if I was okay, but I kept my responses vague, not wanting to add to her anxiety or reveal the true extent of my predicament. One evening, I found myself pacing the living room, trying to devise a plan to regain control. I had been considering my options all day, and it seemed the only way out was to go directly to Jason and try to negotiate from a position of my own strength. I had to make him see that continuing this battle would not be in his best interest. As I prepared myself for the confrontation, I heard a knock on the door. It was Jason. He stood there, looking calm and collected, a smirk playing on his lips that made my blood boil. Larry, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. I tried to keep my composure. What do you want, Jason? He walked into the living room and took a seat on the couch, making himself at home. I thought it would be best if we had a face-to-face conversation. I know you've been trying to find a way out of this mess, and I'm here to help you. Help me? I echoed, trying to suppress the anger in my voice. You're the one who's threatening me. Jason's smirk widened. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm just offering a bit of advice. You see, I know how to play this game. And if you want to come out of this with something intact, you'll need to be strategic. I sat down across from him, my mind racing. And what exactly are you suggesting? Jason leaned forward, his tone taking on a more serious note. You need to give me something substantial in exchange for my silence. I'm not talking about just a bribe. I want a partnership, a share in your business dealings. I can be a powerful ally, but you have to agree to my terms. The proposal was both surprising and disturbing. It was clear that Jason was manipulating me, trying to turn the situation to his advantage. He wasn't just looking for money, he wanted a piece of my professional life. Why should I trust you? I asked, my voice tense. You've already shown that you're willing to use leverage against me. How do I know this isn't just another scheme? Jason's eyes glinted with a cold amusement. You don't have much choice, Larry. You're at my mercy. If you don't agree, I'll make sure everything you've tried to hide comes out. Your career will be in ruins, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. I was cornered, and I knew it. Jason's threats weren't idle. He had the means to ruin me, and my options were rapidly diminishing. The only way to salvage anything was to play along with his demands, at least for now. Fine, I said, trying to sound resolute. What do you want from me? Jason's smile returned, more satisfied this time. I'll draft up a contract outlining our agreement. You'll provide me with a percentage of your profits and access to certain business opportunities. In return, I'll keep quiet about your indiscretions. Let's get this over with, I said, my voice heavy with resignation. Jason nodded, stood up, and walked toward the door. I'll be in touch soon with the details. Remember, this is your last chance to play it smart. As he left, I felt a wave of defeat wash over me. The control I had sought was now entirely out of my hands. Jason had successfully manipulated me into a corner, and I was left grappling with the consequences of his scheming. I sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The betrayal from Jason, coupled with the knowledge that I had to comply with his demands, left me feeling powerless. My revenge had turned into a nightmare, and I had become an unwitting participant in a game I was losing. Katherine entered the room, her expression concerned. Larry, what's going on? I forced a smile, though it felt like a mask hiding my turmoil. Nothing, Katherine. Just business matters. But inside, I knew that the worst was yet to come. The manipulation had only just begun, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The days following my meeting with Jason were a whirlwind of anxiety and forced compliance. I had to maneuver carefully now, juggling Jason's demands while trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy in my personal and professional life. Katherine noticed my growing distraction but remained unaware of the full extent of the chaos. Jason's contract arrived within a few days, drafted with the precision of a legal expert. It detailed his demands: an equity stake in my business, access to confidential information, and a guarantee of silence regarding my personal indiscretions. I signed it reluctantly, knowing that failing to comply would only bring more ruin. The immediate consequence was a deepening sense of despair. My once clear path was now clouded by Jason's influence. The very business I had worked so hard to build was now intertwined with Jason's machinations. Every decision I made felt like a step in his game, each choice a reflection of his power over me. One evening, as I sat in my home office, trying to make sense of the new dynamics, Katherine entered the room. Her eyes were full of concern. Larry, you've been distant lately. What's really going on? I looked up from my paperwork, struggling to maintain my composure. It's just work stress, Katherine. Nothing to worry about. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she nodded and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I knew I couldn't keep up the facade forever. The strain of the situation was beginning to take its toll on my health and sanity. The next day, Jason's influence began to manifest in more concrete ways. He made demands on business decisions, subtly steering them in directions that benefited him. I found myself forced to make compromises I had never considered before. Meetings were tainted with his presence, and his demands became increasingly intrusive. Then, one afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from an old colleague, David Collins. He was a former business partner who had left under less than ideal circumstances. His voice on the other end was tight with urgency. Larry, I heard some troubling things about you. What's going on? My heart raced. I had hoped to keep my personal turmoil hidden from former associates. David, it's complicated. Just some personal issues. Why are you asking? Look, he said, I don't want to pry. But there are rumors going around about you being involved in something unsavory. I thought you should know. The conversation left me shaken. The rumor mill was in full swing, and Jason's influence seemed to be reaching beyond my immediate world. The very business I had fought to build was now threatened by Jason's manipulations and the spreading gossip. That evening, I sat down with Katherine, the weight of everything pressing heavily on me. Katherine, I said, my voice trembling. I need to tell you something. It's about Jason and the mess we're in. Her face paled. Larry, what's going on? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Jason has been blackmailing me. He's been using my own business and personal secrets against me. I had to sign a contract giving him control over some of my business dealings. Catherine's eyes widened in shock. Blackmail? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to worry you, I said, though I knew it was more about my own shame and fear. I thought I could handle it, but it's getting worse. She sat down beside me, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. Larry, we need to find a way out of this. This can't go on. We need to fight back. I shook my head. It's too late for that. Jason has us trapped. He knows everything. If we try to fight him, he'll destroy us. Katherine looked at me with determination. We have to do something. We can't just let him win. Her resolve was reassuring, but the situation felt increasingly dire. Jason's manipulation was spreading, affecting not just my business but my personal life as well. The walls were closing in, and the path to reclaiming control seemed more elusive than ever. As we faced this crisis together, I realized that Jason's game was far from over. The manipulation had only begun, and the fallout from his actions would continue to ripple through every aspect of our lives. The weeks that followed were marked by a pervasive sense of dread. Jason's influence over my business grew more pronounced. Every decision seemed to be tainted by his control, and I felt like a puppet on strings, manipulated at every turn. His demands became more frequent, and the pressure to comply was suffocating. One afternoon, I was in the middle of a crucial meeting with my team when I received a text from Jason. The message was terse and alarming. We need to meet. Urgent. My stomach churned as I excused myself from the meeting, apologizing for the sudden departure. The team exchanged worried glances, but I had no time to explain. I quickly arranged to meet Jason at his office, hoping to understand what new demands he had in store. Jason's office was sleek and modern, a testament to his success and arrogance. When I arrived, he was already waiting, seated behind his desk with a confident air. He motioned for me to sit across from him. Larry, he began, his tone smooth and collected. I trust you're complying with our agreement? I nodded, though my mind was racing with anxiety. Yes, I'm following the terms. Is there a problem? Jason leaned forward, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Actually, there is. I've been reviewing our arrangement, and I've come to realize that we need to adjust our terms. I braced myself for the worst. What kind of adjustments? Jason smiled coldly. I've been offered a lucrative deal from a rival company. They're willing to pay handsomely for the information I have about you. But before I make a decision, I wanted to give you one last chance to meet my new demands. My heart sank. Jason was threatening to expose everything if I didn't comply. The idea of my personal and professional life being laid bare was unbearable. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jason's grin widened. I need full control of one of your major projects. I want access to all the details, and I want a larger percentage of the profits. If you don't agree, I'll hand over everything I know to the highest bidder. I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. Jason's demands were outrageous, but the alternative, being exposed and losing everything, was even worse. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. I'll do it, but you have to keep your end of the bargain. Jason's smile was almost predatory. Don't worry, Larry. As long as you comply, I'll make sure to keep quiet. But remember, you're on a very short leash. I left his office feeling defeated and trapped. The prospect of giving Jason even more control over my business was crushing. The consequences of his blackmail were now extending into every facet of my life. And I was powerless to stop it. When I returned home, Katherine was waiting for me, her face etched with concern. How did it go? She asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. It's worse than I thought. Jason's making even more demands. He's threatening to expose everything if I don't comply. Katherine's eyes widened with fear. This can't go on, Larry. We have to find a way to stop him. I don't know how, I admitted, feeling the weight of my failure pressing down on me. He's got us cornered. Every move I make is dictated by him. Katherine took my hand, her expression resolute. We need to fight back. We can't let him win. There must be something we can do. I looked at her, feeling a glimmer of hope amidst the despair. I'll think of something, I promise. But deep down, I knew that Jason's manipulation had reached a critical point. The stakes were higher than ever, and every step forward seemed to take me further into his trap. As the days passed, I was consumed by the urgency to find a solution, knowing that the longer this continued, the more we would lose. The reckoning was approaching, and the consequences of Jason's schemes were beginning to unravel in ways I could hardly have anticipated. The battle to reclaim control was far from over, and the outcome was still uncertain. The relentless pressure from Jason was reaching a boiling point. His demands had escalated to a level where I felt like every aspect of my life was under siege. The thought of enduring this manipulation indefinitely was unbearable. I had to make a decisive move, and soon, or everything I had worked for would be irreparably destroyed. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and compliance with Jason's latest demands, I sat alone in my study, trying to devise a plan to break free from his control. The weight of the situation was crushing, and I knew that time was running out. Jason's influence was now pervasive, and the possibility of regaining control seemed increasingly distant. As I reviewed the documents related to Jason's demands, a sudden thought struck me. What if I could use Jason's own tactics against him? If I could turn his manipulation into a weapon, perhaps I could regain some leverage. The idea was risky, but desperation often leads to bold decisions. I decided to gather as much information as I could about Jason's operations and any potential vulnerabilities. I started by reviewing the contracts and agreements I had signed, looking for any clauses or details that might be used to my advantage. The more I dug, the more I realized that Jason's control over my business was extensive but not absolute. The next step was to reach out to David Collins, my former colleague who had expressed concern about the rumors circulating about me. I called him, hoping he might have some insight or connections that could help. "David, it's Larry," I said when he answered. "I need your help. There's something I need to discuss with you." David's tone was cautious but receptive. "What's going on, Larry?" I explained the situation, detailing how Jason had blackmailed me and was now threatening to expose me if I didn't comply with his demands. I mentioned the rumors David had heard and how they might be part of Jason's broader scheme. David listened carefully, his silence indicating that he was absorbing the gravity of the situation. "That's quite a mess, Larry. But you're right. Jason's threats are probably part of a larger game. If you have any leverage, it's worth exploring." With David's encouragement, I began to take a more aggressive approach. I started collecting evidence of Jason's unethical practices and questionable business dealings. My goal was to find something that could potentially damage his credibility and undermine his power over me. As I gathered the information, I felt a glimmer of hope. I began to see potential weaknesses in Jason's carefully constructed facade. The documents and records I uncovered pointed to financial irregularities and legal breaches that could be used to challenge his authority. In a strategic move, I decided to leverage this information. I drafted a comprehensive report detailing Jason's misconduct, accompanied by evidence that could expose his illegal activities. The next step was to deliver this information to the appropriate authorities, but I knew I had to be careful. If Jason caught wind of my plan, he would surely retaliate. I arranged a confidential meeting with a trusted lawyer who specialized in corporate fraud. I handed over the report and explained the situation, emphasizing the urgency of the matter. The lawyer reviewed the evidence and agreed that it was substantial enough to warrant serious investigation. With the lawyer's assistance, I filed a formal complaint against Jason, presenting the evidence to the authorities. The process was slow and fraught with uncertainty, but it was a crucial step in turning the tide. In the meantime, I braced myself for Jason's response. I knew he wouldn't take kindly to being challenged, and I prepared for the possibility of counterattacks. I tightened security around my business and personal life, making sure that any attempts to undermine me would be met with vigilance. As the investigation began, the pressure on Jason intensified. The authorities started to scrutinize his operations, and the rumors that had once been whispers began to gain traction. The balance of power was shifting, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. Katherine noticed the change in my demeanor. "Larry, you seem different. Is something finally going right?" I nodded, though the outcome was still uncertain. "I've taken steps to fight back. I'm hoping this will be the turning point." The battle was far from over, but I felt like I was finally regaining control. Jason's manipulation had pushed me to the edge, but it also forced me to confront his schemes head-on. The final gambit was in motion, and the outcome would determine whether I could reclaim my life or be swallowed by the consequences of Jason's machinations. The weeks following the filing of the complaint were a tense waiting game. The investigation into Jason's activities was progressing, but the pace was excruciatingly slow. I constantly checked for updates, my anxiety mounting with each passing day. Jason was undoubtedly aware of the probe and would be preparing his countermeasures. One afternoon, as I was in a meeting discussing the fallout from Jason's interference, I received an urgent call from the lawyer handling the case. My heart raced as I answered. "Larry," the lawyer said, "we've hit a snag. Jason's legal team has launched a counter-offensive, claiming that the evidence against him is part of a malicious attempt to sabotage his reputation. They've filed a lawsuit against you for defamation." I felt a chill run down my spine. The very leverage I had hoped would expose Jason was now being used against me. "What does this mean for the investigation?" "It means the authorities are going to have to tread carefully," the lawyer explained. "Jason's accusations are putting pressure on us. We'll need to bolster our evidence and prepare for a protracted legal battle." The news was a devastating blow. Not only was the investigation at risk, but I was now facing a lawsuit that could further damage my reputation and financial stability. Jason had successfully turned the tables, and I found myself caught in a web of legal and personal turmoil. When I returned home, Katherine noticed my distressed state. "Larry, what's happening?" I slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of my failures. "Jason's retaliated. He's filed a lawsuit against me, claiming that my evidence is false and intended to ruin him." Katherine's face fell. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, feeling helpless. "Jason's maneuvered everything to his advantage. It's like he's 2 steps ahead of us." As the lawsuit gained traction, Jason's tactics began to take a toll on my personal and professional life. Rumors spread like wildfire, further eroding my credibility. The stress of the legal battle seeped into every aspect of my life, causing sleepless nights and mounting frustration. In the midst of this chaos, I began to receive anonymous threats. My phone rang with unsettling frequency, each call leaving me more unnerved than the last. The threats were veiled but unmistakable in their intent, adding another layer of fear to an already dire situation. Despite my efforts to keep the details of the case confidential, the media caught wind of the scandal. The headlines were unforgiving, painting me as a disgruntled businessman lashing out at a successful rival. The public perception shifted against me, and my business suffered as clients and partners began to distance themselves. Katherine did her best to support me, but the strain was evident. Our conversations often turned into arguments, the stress of the situation fracturing our relationship. I could see the toll it was taking on her, and the guilt of dragging her into this mess weighed heavily on me. One evening, as I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, I received a call from David Collins. His voice was urgent and concerned. "Larry, I've been following the news, and it looks like things are unraveling quickly. I might have a lead that could help." I listened intently as David explained that he had uncovered additional information about Jason's questionable activities that could be used to counter his claims. The information wasn't conclusive, but it could provide a foothold in the battle. "David, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," I said, my voice cracking. "The lawsuit and the public backlash are overwhelming. If we don't find something solid soon, we're done for." David's reassurance was a small comfort. "I'll do everything I can to help. Just hang in there a little longer." The pressure continued to mount as Jason's legal team made aggressive moves to solidify their position. The courtroom drama was intense, with each side presenting their arguments and evidence. My own lawyer worked tirelessly to counter Jason's claims, but the legal battle was taking its toll on everyone involved. Despite the mounting evidence and the efforts to clear my name, it became increasingly clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. Jason's manipulation had reached its climax, and the fallout was profound. The collapse was imminent, and it was only a matter of time before the full extent of the damage would be revealed. As I faced the final stages of the legal battle, I knew that the outcome would determine not only my future but the future of those I cared about. The fight against Jason had pushed me to the brink, and the collapse was a harsh reminder of the consequences of his machinations. The struggle for redemption and justice was far from over, but the reality of Jason's victory was beginning to sink in. The path ahead was uncertain, and the weight of the situation left me grappling with the harsh truths of my choices and their repercussions. The final stages of the legal battle were a blur of relentless pressure and mounting despair. As Jason's influence continued to tighten around me, the toll on my personal and professional life became increasingly evident. The collapse was no longer a distant threat, it was now a stark reality. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Jason's legal team presented their case with unyielding aggression, painting me as the instigator of a baseless attack against a successful entrepreneur. My own lawyer fought valiantly, but the weight of the accusations and the public scrutiny seemed insurmountable. The media coverage of the trial was relentless. Each day brought new headlines, amplifying the scandal and further eroding my credibility. The stories portrayed me as a desperate man out to destroy Jason's reputation, leaving little room for my side of the story. The public perception was turning sharply against me, and my reputation was being systematically dismantled. Meanwhile, Jason's retaliatory measures extended beyond the courtroom. His influence seeped into every corner of my life, affecting my business dealings, personal relationships, and even my mental well-being. The anonymous threats I had received escalated into more direct forms of harassment. I found my office vandalized and my personal space invaded. The constant harassment was a constant reminder of Jason's power over me. At home, the strain on my relationship with Katherine was palpable. The stress had reached a breaking point, and our conversations often devolved into arguments. The guilt of dragging her into this mess was overwhelming, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. We were drifting further apart, unable to find solace in each other's presence. One evening, as I sat alone in my study, the weight of the situation was almost unbearable. My business was faltering, my reputation was in tatters, and my personal life was in disarray. The battle against Jason seemed to be slipping through my fingers, and I felt like I was losing everything I had worked so hard to build. In the midst of this turmoil, David Collins reached out again, offering a glimmer of hope. He had managed to dig up some new information that could potentially turn the tide. "Larry, I found something significant. It's not a complete solution, but it might give us an edge." David's discovery was a detailed account of Jason's financial misdeeds, including evidence of illegal transactions and hidden assets. It wasn't a guaranteed way to overturn the situation, but it provided a new avenue to explore. I arranged to meet with my lawyer to review the new evidence, hoping it could shift the balance of power. As we examined the information, a small spark of optimism emerged. The evidence was compelling and could potentially expose Jason's fraudulent activities. However, the challenge was enormous. The legal battle had already caused significant damage, and the road to redemption was fraught with obstacles. With renewed determination, I instructed my lawyer to incorporate the new evidence into our defense. We filed motions to introduce the information into the ongoing proceedings, hoping it would force a reconsideration of the case. The legal process was slow and painstaking, but it was a chance to fight back. Despite the efforts to turn the tide, the damage done by Jason's manipulation was profound. The public's perception of me had been irrevocably altered, and my business was struggling to recover. The lawsuit continued to drain resources, and the pressure of the ongoing legal battle left me physically and emotionally exhausted. One night, as I sat alone in the darkness of my study, I felt a deep sense of resignation. The struggle had consumed my life, and the fallout from Jason's actions was evident in every aspect of my existence. The collapse was a harsh reality, and the consequences of his machinations had become impossible to ignore. Katherine approached me quietly, her face etched with sadness. "Larry, we need to face the reality of what's happened. We can't keep living like this." I looked at her, my heart heavy with regret. "I know. I've tried everything I can think of, but it feels like it's all slipping away." Katherine took my hand, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and resignation. "Whatever happens next, we need to find a way to move forward. We can't keep living in the shadow of this nightmare." The finality of her words struck me deeply. The collapse was not just a professional failure but a personal one as well. The fight against Jason had taken its toll, and the fallout had left scars that would be difficult to heal. As I faced the reality of the situation, I knew that the battle was not over, but the outcome was clear. The fall was a testament to the destructive power of Jason's manipulation and the profound impact it had on every facet of my life. The road to recovery would be long and challenging, but the first step was to accept the harsh truths and begin the process of rebuilding from the ashes of the collapse. The aftermath of the legal battle was a somber reflection of the devastation that had unfolded. The dust was settling, but the scars remained, a constant reminder of the relentless manipulation Jason had orchestrated. The legal defeat was just one facet of a broader collapse that had left me grappling with the consequences of my choices. In the wake of the trial, the damage to my reputation was profound. The media frenzy had left me branded as a villain, and the fallout extended into my professional life. Clients and partners who had once supported me now distanced themselves, and the trust I had built over years was in tatters. My business struggled to stay afloat, and the financial strain was taking a heavy toll. Katherine and I were living in a strained and fragile state. The arguments that had become frequent during the legal battle had evolved into a chasm between us. The weight of the situation had driven a wedge into our relationship, and the emotional distance was palpable. We were no longer the couple we had once been, and the shared burden of the collapse had eroded the foundation of our marriage. One evening, as I sat in our now sparse living room, I felt a profound sense of loss. The life we had built together seemed to be slipping away, and the future was shrouded in uncertainty. Katherine sat across from me, her expression reflecting a mix of exhaustion and resignation. "Larry," she said quietly, "we need to talk about what's next. We can't keep going like this." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I know. I'm at a loss for what to do. The business is in disarray, and our relationship is suffering. I don't know how to fix this." Katherine took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine for answers. "Maybe we need to consider making some changes. Starting over, perhaps. It's clear that the current path isn't working." The idea of starting over was both daunting and oddly comforting. It offered a glimmer of hope amidst the rubble of our lives. "You're right. We need to rethink everything. Maybe a fresh start is what we need." With a sense of tentative resolve, we began to discuss the possibility of starting anew. It was a daunting prospect, but it seemed like the only viable option to escape the shadow of Jason's manipulation. We considered relocating, rebuilding our lives from the ground up, and finding a way to move forward. As we worked through the process of disentangling ourselves from the remnants of our past life, we faced a series of challenges. Selling the business, severing old connections, and addressing the financial fallout were just a few of the hurdles we encountered. The process was exhausting and emotional, but it was also a necessary step toward reclaiming some semblance of normalcy. Despite the difficulties, there was a small but significant shift in our relationship. The act of confronting our problems together and making decisions about the future began to rebuild the connection between us. It was clear that the road to recovery would be long and fraught with challenges. But the effort to rebuild our lives was a shared endeavor. Throughout this period, I reflected on the lessons learned from the ordeal. Jason's manipulation had exposed vulnerabilities I hadn't fully understood, and the experience had taught me about the fragility of trust and the importance of resilience. The collapse had been a harsh teacher, but it offered insights that I hoped would guide me in the future. As we prepared to embark on a new chapter, there was a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead was uncertain, but the act of making changes and facing the future together offered a glimmer of hope. The aftermath of the collapse had left its mark, but it also presented an opportunity for growth and renewal. The finality of the situation was a sobering reminder of the consequences of Jason's actions, but it also marked the beginning of a new phase in our lives. The journey to rebuild and recover was just starting, and while the scars of the past would remain, they served as a testament to the resilience and determination to forge a new path forward. The process of rebuilding began with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. The remnants of our past life had been dismantled, and the path ahead was uncertain. Katherine and I faced the daunting task of starting from scratch, but there was a renewed sense of determination to forge a new future. We decided to relocate to a smaller town, far from the chaos and scrutiny that had enveloped our previous life. The move was symbolic, a fresh start away from the shadows of the past. Finding a new home was a significant step, and the search for a suitable place became a metaphor for our desire to create a new beginning. Settling into our new environment was both liberating and challenging. The pace of life was slower, and the community was more intimate, offering a respite from the intense public scrutiny we had endured. Yet, the transition was not without its difficulties. We had to adapt to a new rhythm of life, and the process of reintegration was accompanied by the emotional weight of our past experiences. Katherine and I began to focus on rebuilding our personal lives. The strain of the previous months had taken a toll on our relationship, but the act of starting over together provided an opportunity for healing. We sought couples counseling to address the issues that had arisen and to work on rekindling the connection that had been overshadowed by the turmoil. In counseling, we were encouraged to communicate openly and to support each other through the process of recovery. The sessions were often emotional, but they offered a structured way to address the underlying issues and to rebuild trust. Slowly, we began to rediscover the strength of our partnership and the shared values that had once bound us together. On the professional front, I faced the challenge of reinventing myself. The collapse of my previous business had been a harsh blow, but it also provided an opportunity to explore new avenues. I considered various options, including starting a new venture or finding a different career path altogether. The process of evaluating my skills and interests was both daunting and invigorating. With Katherine's support, I decided to pursue a career in consulting, leveraging my experience in a different capacity. The transition was not without its hurdles, but it allowed me to use my skills in a new way while avoiding the pitfalls that had led to the previous downfall. Building a new professional identity was a slow process, but the sense of purpose and direction was a welcome change. As we settled into our new routines, we also began to rebuild our social connections. The move had brought us to a new community, and we made a conscious effort to engage with our neighbors and to participate in local activities. It was a way to forge new relationships and to create a sense of belonging in our new environment. The process of rebuilding was gradual and required patience. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but each step forward was a testament to our resilience. The scars of the past were still present, but they served as a reminder of the journey we had endured and the strength we had found in each other. One evening, as I looked out over the quiet neighborhood from our new home, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The ordeal with Jason had been a harsh and transformative experience, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about perseverance and the importance of starting anew. Katherine joined me, and we stood together, looking out at the horizon. "We've come a long way," she said quietly. "It's been a difficult journey, but we're moving forward." I nodded, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. "Yes, we are. It's been tough, but we're building something new. And that's something to be grateful for." As we faced the future, there was a sense of hope that accompanied the rebuilding process. The road ahead was still uncertain, but the act of forging a new path offered a sense of renewal. The past had left its mark, but it had also paved the way for a future that was defined by resilience and the promise of a new beginning. Months had passed since we relocated and began rebuilding our lives. The turmoil and chaos of the past seemed like a distant memory, but the scars remained, etched into our memories as a reminder of what we had overcome. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Katherine and I found ourselves gradually adjusting to our new normal. Our new home, though modest compared to our previous residence, had become a sanctuary. The change of scenery and the slower pace of life provided a much-needed reprieve from the intense scrutiny we had faced. The neighborhood was welcoming, and we slowly integrated into the community, making new friends and establishing a sense of belonging. On the professional front, I had made significant progress in my new consulting career. The work was fulfilling, and I was finding satisfaction in helping others navigate their own challenges. The transition had been challenging, but it was also empowering to see my efforts bearing fruit. The sense of accomplishment in rebuilding my career was a source of renewed confidence and motivation. Katherine's efforts to rekindle our relationship had also begun to pay off. The counseling sessions had been instrumental in addressing the issues that had arisen during the crisis. We had worked hard to rebuild trust and communication, and our relationship was slowly but steadily improving. It was a process, and not without its difficulties, but the commitment to each other was unwavering. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch of our new home, I looked at Katherine and saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. The weight of the past had not entirely disappeared, but the lightness of our new beginning was evident. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "We've come a long way since we moved here. The changes we've made have been hard, but I think we're on the right path." Katherine smiled, her expression reflecting a mixture of relief and optimism. "I agree. It's been a journey, but I feel like we're finally finding our footing. It's not perfect, but it's a start." The sense of renewal was palpable. We had faced the storm and emerged on the other side, and while the past was an indelible part of our story, it no longer defined us. The new chapter we were writing was one of resilience and hope, shaped by the lessons learned and the strength gained from our experiences. As we looked toward the future, there were new opportunities on the horizon. I was exploring ways to expand my consulting practice and to make a positive impact in the community. Katherine was also pursuing new interests, taking up hobbies and activities that brought her joy and fulfillment. One of the most significant milestones in our journey was the decision to give back. We had both been deeply affected by the challenges we faced, and we felt a strong desire to support others who were navigating their own struggles. We began volunteering with local organizations, using our experiences to offer guidance and support to those in need. The act of giving back was both cathartic and rewarding. It provided a sense of purpose and allowed us to channel our experiences into something positive. It was a way to make a meaningful difference in the lives of others and to contribute to the healing process in our own way. As we continued to build our new life, there was a growing sense of gratitude for the journey we had undertaken. The challenges we had faced had been formidable, but they had also led to personal growth and a deeper appreciation for the simple joys of life. One evening, as we celebrated the anniversary of our move with a small gathering of friends and neighbors, I looked around at the faces of those who had supported us along the way. The sense of community and connection was a testament to the strength of our new beginning. In a toast to the future, I raised my glass and spoke with sincerity. To new beginnings and to the strength we've found in each other. The past has shaped us, but it's the future that we're building together. Here's to the journey ahead. The room echoed with cheers and applause, and as I looked at Katherine, I felt a profound sense of hope. The road ahead was still unfolding, but it was a road paved with the resilience and determination to embrace a new chapter. The future was ours to shape, and the promise of a new beginning was a source of inspiration and optimism. As the night wore on and the stars twinkled overhead, I felt a deep sense of contentment. We had weathered the storm, faced the consequences, and emerged stronger on the other side. The new beginning was not just a fresh start, it was a testament to our ability to overcome, to rebuild, and to forge a future filled with hope and possibility. As the seasons changed and time continued its steady march, Katherine and I settled into our new rhythm. Our new life was marked by a sense of stability and renewal that had been hard-earned. We were learning to embrace the present, finding joy in the everyday moments that now seemed more precious than ever. My consulting career had gained momentum, and I was beginning to make a name for myself in the field. The work was challenging and fulfilling, and I took pride in helping clients navigate their own professional and personal hurdles. Each success reinforced my confidence and helped mend the wounds of the past. My professional reputation was slowly rebuilding, and it was gratifying to see my efforts pay off. Katherine, too, was thriving in her new pursuits. She had rediscovered her passion for painting and had even begun exhibiting her work in local galleries. Her artistic journey had become a source of personal fulfillment and had allowed her to channel her creativity into something deeply meaningful. The joy she found in her art was infectious and served as a reminder of the strength and resilience she had displayed throughout our ordeal. We continued to invest time and energy into our relationship, using the lessons from our counseling sessions to build a stronger foundation. The communication between us was more open and honest, and we had developed a newfound appreciation for each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. It was a testament to our commitment to each other and to the work we had put into healing our bond. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden of our home, enjoying the tranquility of our surroundings, I reflected on the journey we had undertaken. The struggles and setbacks had been significant, but they had led us to a place of renewed purpose and connection. Katherine joined me with a cup of tea and sat beside me. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with wonder. I smiled, taking a moment to savor the peaceful moment. "Yes, I do. It's hard to believe how much has changed. We've faced so much, but we've come out stronger. It feels like we're finally on solid ground." Katherine nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and contentment. "I feel the same way. It hasn't been easy, but I'm grateful for what we've learned and how we've grown. It's been a long road, but we've made it." The conversation brought a sense of closure to a chapter that had been fraught with challenges. We had faced the consequences of Jason's manipulation and emerged with a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. The scars of the past were still present, but they no longer held the same power over us. As we moved forward, we continued to focus on building a future defined by hope and possibility. The lessons from our past experiences had shaped our approach to life, guiding us to appreciate the small victories and to embrace the opportunities that came our way. In the months that followed, we continued to make strides in our personal and professional lives. Our involvement in community service remained a significant part of our routine, providing a sense of purpose and fulfillment. We found joy in the connections we had made and in the positive impact we were able to contribute to the lives of others. One evening, as we celebrated the success of a local charity event that we had helped organize, I looked around at the faces of the people we had come to know and appreciate. The sense of community and the shared commitment to making a difference were a testament to the positive changes that had emerged from our journey. As I stood with Katherine, surrounded by friends and supporters, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The past had shaped us, but it no longer defined us. We had navigated the storm, faced the consequences, and found a path forward that was marked by resilience and hope. In a moment of quiet reflection, I looked at Katherine and saw the strength and determination that had carried us through the darkest times. We had faced challenges together and emerged stronger, and as we continued to build our future, we did so with a renewed sense of purpose and optimism. The road ahead was still unfolding, but it was a road we were eager to travel. The lessons of the past had prepared us for the journey, and the promise of a new beginning offered a beacon of hope. Moving forward, we embraced the future with a sense of gratitude and a commitment to living a life defined by resilience, connection, and possibility.